Hello and welcome to Sports Illustrated's Winners Club. I am Bill Enright. With me, Jennifer Piacenti and Michael Fabiano. It's game day, week 1 of the 2021 NFL season, and we're here to help you guys win. We're answering your lineup questions. We're discussing some of today's biggest fantasy football injuries. We're going to help you make some money with Jen Piacenti's player props. Fabs, Jen, we've been waiting for this day for so long. How you guys doing?
I'm feeling good, man. Look at this. I mean, I know the Cowboys lost already, but I love the fantasy production we got. That Thursday night game got me fired up, man.
Me too. I'm a Cowboys fan. You know what? I knew they were going to cover that spread. And over on SI Sportsbook, you could get them for plus money with 7.5 points. It was such an easy pick. So I hope you guys all cashed out.
All right, we got some injuries to update everyone watching on. Some big name players: Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, Odell Beckham Jr., Kenny Golladay. Jen, what's the latest?
Really big news everywhere. The latest is that Trey Sermon is out for today and Zach Moss is out today as a healthy scratch. So those are two things that weren't necessarily on all of our radars. Be sure you check your lineups. Wayne Gallman is also out. Keelan Cole is going to be a game time decision. Austin Eckler is expected to play, but we'll talk more about what we expect out of Austin Eckler. Curtis Samuel is out. Jamison Crowder's out. Josh Reynolds, we're still waiting to hear. They haven't turned in their injury report. Last I checked it for the Titans. And LaMichael Pirine is not on the injury report for today, so I expect him to play. One defensive note also, cornerback Xavier Rhodes is out for Indianapolis.
Quick update there, Jen. Keelan Cole is inactive, and Josh Reynolds is also inactive, which means, well, Julio and AJ are going to get a ton of targets. But we knew that in New York. Corey Davis, and then a little bit of Elijah Moore because Jamison Crowder is also on the COVID list.
Fabs, you mentioned New York. Let's talk about the Giants for a second here because Saquon Barkley is expected to play, but just how much playing is he going to do?
That's the big question, right? And so my guy over at NFL Network, Ian Rappaport, tweeted out this morning that Barkley would be used sparingly. Sparingly is not a word that I want to hear when I'm talking about the first running back I likely drafted in my fantasy league, right? So I also texted with Rapp this morning, and I joked around and said, sparingly, you've got all of the fantasy football owners out there freaked out. And he said they should be. So if Saquon Barkley is on your roster and you have depth, you could start a wide receiver at flex or another running back at flex. You might want to keep Barkley on the sidelines. This is why I have exactly 0 shares of Saquon Barkley. Just too many question marks to start the season.
That's not good news if you drafted Saquon Barkley at the end of the first round or the early portion of the second round with Fabiano's inside information there from me and Rappaport of NFL Network. Use sparingly. Are you expecting less than 10 carries?
Listen, it sounds like it, right? I mean, it sounds like they're going to use a lot of Devontae Booker, but here's the thing, and I love Rapp. We've seen scenarios before where we've heard that players were going to be on snap counts and suddenly they put up 18 touches, right? So it's not outside of the realm of possibility that Barkley gets enough touches to be relevant as a flex starter. But, you're talking about one of the top insiders in the National Football League and a guy who's, pretty good. So if he's saying that Barkley is going to be used sparingly, that's a powerful word from a fantasy football standpoint. That scares me. So I'd probably try to avoid Barkley if I could. And if you do start him, flex at best.
All right, Jen, let's go over to the 4:00 games and even tonight's Sunday night game. Any injuries that we should be mindful of?
So obviously the Saquon Barkley injury, which we just talked about, but maybe most importantly, Odell Beckham Jr., who we think probably is just a game time decision. And I know that a lot of us are hesitant to start him in our lineups. I'm sure Fabiano is going to give us his opinion on that one as well. Of course, Will Fuller's out. Traquan Smith is out. If you missed that news, we're still keeping an eye on Nelson Aguilar. Preston Williams is questionable, and Evan Ingram is definitely out. I guess we're also keeping an eye on Kenny Golladay still.
Hey, Fabs, with Traquan Smith being out, who's going to catch the ball for the Saints this week other than Alvin Kamara?
Alvin Kamara. Well, Marquez Callaway is going to end up getting covered by Jair Alexander. That's not a great matchup. In fact, it's a terrible matchup. And if I had depth at wide receiver, I think you could probably start somebody else over Callaway. I don't like the matchup. Like, this is a bad matchup for the Saints. When you look at no Michael Thomas, no Traquan Smith, Jameis Winston in his first game with the Saints. It's a home game, but they're playing in Jacksonville because of Hurricane Ida. There's not a lot of Saints that I trust in this contest. Really, it's only Alvin Kamara, and that is about it. Jameis probably a go in 2 QB or super flex leagues. And also, Marshawn Lattimore is questionable for this game as well. So that could mean Davante Adams scores all of the points in this contest.
All right, let's get over to some start and sit advice from the original start and sit author. That's Michael Fabiano. And I want to remind everybody, if you're watching, there's 3 places you can watch: Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. So if we are on your screens now, don't forget to drop your lineup questions. We're going to be getting to those and answering and helping you guys win in just a little bit. But Fabs, I want to start with your quarterbacks. You got some really good ones on the list this week. Stardoms, you got Ryan Tannehill and Jalen Hurts, but I got bad news if you have guys like Big Ben or Jameis Winston, because they are on your sit list.
Yeah, that's right. So my stardoms include, as you mentioned, Jalen Hurts, Ryan Tannehill, both really good matchups. At running back, James Robinson is a must start. I know a lot of folks out there drafted him as a flex before Travis Etienne got hurt. Well, guess what? Christmas came early. He's an RB1 this week in my rankings. I also really like Raheem Mostert, and I don't know how anyone out there who has Mostert can sit him this week. You have to play him. No Trey Sermon. JaMychal Hasty's going to be the number 2 back there for the Niners. Start Raheem Mostert. It's the Lions. They're terrible. At wide receiver, I really like T. Higgins in a matchup against the Vikings. I think that's going to be a high-scoring game. Brandon Ayuk against those Motor City Kitties. Get him into your lineup. Logan Thomas for the Washington football team without Curtis Samuel is a very good play, as is Dallas Goedert. Now we go down to the sits. As you mentioned, Big Ben. 5 career games against the Bills, has never scored more than 13.5 fantasy points. That's not good. I would also sit Jameis Winston. At running back, keep this in mind, guys, okay? I can't go out there and tell you to sit second and third string running backs. I got to tell you who's got the bad matchups. Josh Jacobs is a bad matchup. Do you have to play him? Probably. In DFS, of course you don't. But the matchup's not great, and I'm not sure what he's going to give you as a pass catcher. Same goes with DeAndre Swift. He is active. He's going to play today, right? He's good to go. Do you play him against the Niners where negative game script could be a big issue? If I have depth, if I can start him as a flex at best, okay, but I think maybe you can find a wide receiver or another running back to replace him. Don't love the matchup at wide receiver. Odell Beckham Jr., game time decision, right? Listen, folks, I get it. He's Odell Beckham Jr. This is not the Big Apple anymore. He's averaged 12 points a game as a member of the Cleveland Browns. If you want to start him as a wide receiver 3 or a flex, okay, I get it. The expectation should be tempered, and Kansas City was very tough against wide receivers last year. Kenny Golladay, I've mentioned this all week. When a player comes out and says, our offense might start the season off slowly, yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in that player. Kenny Golladay is a guy that I would not play if I had depth. And at tight end, Gerald Everett, Eric Ebron, both on your bench.
All right, Jen, I want to ask you about some of these startups that Fabs just ran through. I had Dak Prescott, and I benched him.
Oh.
And this is a league with bonus points up the wazoo for 300, 350, 400 passing yards. He's got 45 points on my bench. But I started Jalen Hurts because I think that's going to be a high-scoring affair down there in Atlanta with the Eagles and the Falcons.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, last year, Atlanta surrendered the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks and the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Now, they're a little bit better on the ground, but I think they're going to allow a lot of points again. There's no reason to think why not. We all saw what Jalen Hurts can do for our fantasy rosters. He has that combination of being incredibly mobile, and he can also throw the ball. And we want to see him with Devonta Smith today. All eyes are going to be on that rookie. I think it could be a really big game for Philadelphia, and it's exactly why I picked them to cover the spread as well in our weekly contest.
What do you think about a Hurts DFS stack with Devonta Smith, maybe throwing a Kyle Pitts or a Calvin Ridley for a game stack?
100%. And that's a really good point you put up there, Bill. It's really nice when you have a high point total game to have players from both sides coming back. A lot of times you tend to want to stack the one side, but in order to get that high point total, you have to have points on both sides. And Kyle Pitts is an incredible value right now. We know Julio Jones is gone. We understand that he's been working more like a wide receiver in preseason. Calvin Ridley, of course, he's going to get a lot of opportunity, but who's the other guy going to be? Russell Gage. I love the price for Kyle Pitts. So I would absolutely I would use both sides of that game.
Yeah, the over-under for the Falcons and Eagles game is 48.5. That's on SI Sportsbook. Go check it out, especially if you live in Colorado. Fabs, I want to go back to you for a second here. We talked a little bit about the Saints pass catchers. Jameis Winston, I almost feel bad for him because he's in a really tough spot. He's coming and taking over for Drew Brees, a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest of all time. He doesn't have Michael Thomas. He's throwing to guys you mentioned, Marquez Callaway and Jawan Johnson, but Jameis Winston, is he even fantasy? Is he worth being on a fantasy roster at this point?
Well, first off, how dare you not look at my rankings and start Jalen Hurts over Dak Prescott? I think that's a Giants fan hater right there. How about the Cowboys? All right, anyway.
As a Giants fan, I'm screwed either way there.
We're going to get so much hurt this year, Bill. We're going to bully you. Team up on you.
I kid. I think Jameis Winston is going to have value during the course of the season. I think he will. This is a Sean Payton offense, right? But this is a bad matchup.
Yeah.
And unless you're in a 2 QB or Superflex league, I don't think you can trust him. Green Bay, tough pass defense. Jair Alexander could potentially make Marquez Callaway, his favorite target, invisible. It's a home game for the Saints, but it's not because they're playing in Jacksonville. I think better things are to come for Jameis. But keep in mind, this is a guy who the last time he was a starting quarterback in the National Football League had 30 interceptions. Now, he had LASIK between then and now, so maybe that would help, but we're going to find out. This is just not a great matchup for Jameis. The weapons are not going to be there outside of Alvin Kamara. Remember, they released Latavius Murray. I feel like the Saints are going to maybe try to run the ball a little bit more. Maybe Tony Jones Jr. pops for fantasy managers, but I don't trust him enough to start him. But Jameis is certainly rosterable. I just don't love the matchup this week. There will be far better matchups in the future for Jameis Winston.
Well, hopefully Jameis Winston can see the stripes on the ball, the lines on the ball with the LASIK. But I would also like to point out for DFS purposes, your point is well taken about Jameis Winston throwing 30 interceptions last time he played. So I don't have any problem using a value Green Bay defense in my lineups.
That's a great point. I actually I drafted the Colts in my season-long league. I dropped them this week. I don't care about. I'll stream defenses every week. I picked up the Packers because I think they're gonna. They're a couple interceptions will be coming from the arm of Jameis Winston right into the Packers defenders' hands, and I think they're going to get a couple sacks. So if you are looking for to stream a good defense for season long, or as Jen mentioned, you need a cheap DFS option, go with the Green Bay Packers on defense. One last question about Fabs to start him, sit him. Kenny Golladay, what are you guys doing with him? He fell in a lot of rounds, or in a lot of leagues, where he almost became a value pick because he didn't practice at all this summer. He wasn't in training camp. We know his injury history, but at some point, there was a time in drafts where Kenny Golladay was still the best receiver on the board, where you almost had to take him because it turned into a value proposition. But in terms of starting him in week one, Fabs, I know you're sitting him. Do you just want to take that wait and see approach with Kenny G?
Yeah, I do. I think at some point that selection will pay dividends for fantasy managers. I just don't think it'll be this week. The rapport is clearly not going to be there with Daniel Jones. As you mentioned, he was banged up for the entirety of the preseason and training camp, was dealing with the hamstring. But the G-men paid him a whole lot of money, so they are going to throw the football to him. I just don't love the matchup. And again, when the player comes out and says the offense might start off slowly, that is a red flag for me. Saquon Barkley has been limited throughout camp. There was no preseason for him. We're expecting him to play today, but it's going to be, as Ian Rappaport said, let's just suggest him not being in your starting lineup when you talk about a player who is going to be substantially limited in terms of his touches.
Jen, any thoughts on Kenny Golladay?
I have the exact same opinion. I'm not that interested in Kenny Golladay. I don't have him on a single team. There was a point where he became a value. I think he will have definitely at least some big weeks and return value to the coaches that drafted him. But I'm not having any part of it, certainly not this week.
All right, I'm with you. I just think between Daniel Jones' lack of protection, Von Miller, Bradley Chubb going after him against that putrid Giants offensive line, I don't know how much Daniel Jones will be able to do 5 to 7 step dropbacks and get the ball down the field. I think it's going to be a much better game if you do have a Giants wide receiver to use someone like Sterling Shepard. All right, let's get to your questions. If you have a lineup decision and you need to know, maybe you're on the fence about a player, maybe you have someone that's injured, you want a question, you want an answer, you guys have questions, we have the answers. I got that right finally. We have Fabiano's player projections. We have Jen's great analysis. Let's start off with some of your questions from the chat room. The first one is from Miggy. Brandon Ayuk or Cooper Kupp in the flex, and he is in a PPR league.
Jen, you want to take this one first?
I want to know what kind of a league you're in that Kupp and Ayuk are only your flex play. Congratulations. You obviously have a phenomenal team. I'm actually going to lean Ayuk here because of the matchup. I think it's going to be fantastic for San Francisco today versus the very weak Detroit secondary. So I'm going to go Ayuk here.
Fabs, any insight into that one?
I actually have Cooper Kupp ranked one spot higher than Brandon Ayuk, so it's an absolute coin toss. So we'll go with Piacenti on this one. You can't lose either way.
Yeah, something about Matthew Stafford taking over as the Rams quarterback has me really invested into this Los Angeles offense, and that's even when we lost out on Cam Akers. They brought in Sony Michel. I was high on Tyler Higbee to start the year. I think Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp can both finish as top 15 wide receivers. Fabs, where do you have Stafford in your rankings this week?
He's right in that low QB1 range, right at 11 or 12. So certainly a very startable asset.
All right, next question from the audience. And by the way, if you're watching this on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, just type your question into that comment section or in that chat room, and we'll get them answered throughout the show. This one is from Matt. He wants to know, he has a running back situation, and this one is based off the news from this morning because he probably wasn't thinking about starting Devin Singletary over Damian Harris. But now that Zach Moss is out, what do you make of this RB situation for our guy, Matt?
This one's tough, right? And I am going to suggest starting Damian Harris because I just don't trust Devin Singletary, but it's a lot closer than it was about an hour ago.
Jen, what do you think about that? What do you think about that Bills backfield, Jen?
Yeah, I think it's a mess, and I avoided it as well. It does give you some clarity that Zach Moss isn't going to be there, so at least you can feel a little more confident. But usually Zach Moss was the one with the goal line carries. I don't know how much they're going to get versus a Pittsburgh defense either. So I don't like either one. I would definitely go Damian Harris here over Devin Singletary, though.
All right, next question from the crowd. Another Matt. He wants to know, with Trey Sermon being out, is it worth putting Michael Hasty, the second-year running back for the San Francisco 49ers, in his flex in a PPR? The only problem with that is we don't know what his considerations are. But Fabs, I can't imagine, unless you're in a 16-team, 18-team league, that you're going to be using JaMychal Hasty as one of your flex options.
Yeah, that one's rough. I think you could probably find better options without question. Now, is there a scenario out there where the Lions are getting boat raced and the Niners decide, well, you know, Raheem is a guy that we want to make sure we protect, and he doesn't get a lot of touches in the fourth quarter, and they use Hasty? I mean, sure, that could potentially happen. I just don't know if I want to start someone on my fantasy team hoping that he gets some garbage time love. So I would probably pass on Hasty as a flex starter. There are far better options. I mean, Devin Singletary is a really good flex starter based on the fact that Zach Moss is going to be out this week.
All right, Jen, the next question is for you. It's from Frapp. He has two really good running backs, but one of them a little bit banged up, as we learned earlier when Michael Fabiano had that report about Saquon Barkley being used sparingly. Jen, Frapp wants to know, should he start Najee Harris or Saquon Barkley?
It's Najee for me. We know this guy is going to get a ton of work. He'll definitely get the 30 carries. We don't know if Saquon's going to get 10, 20, 30. And, you know, even if he does, it's not a great matchup versus Denver anyway. It's not like it's so phenomenal. So I'm definitely going to go Najee here. I like Najee this year. I know he's a rookie, but I have high expectations.
Fabs, I mean, imagine starting your draft with Saquon Barkley and Najee Harris. I know you went running back in a lot of leagues this year.
Yeah, I don't have any Saquon Barkley shares, like none.
I don't have any either.
Maybe like in best ball, but I don't remember. But in my redrafts, I don't have any Saquon Barkley at all. So yeah, Jen's right. Najee Harris is the obvious play here.
All right, we'll get to another question, and then we'll move over to some of Jen's player props. If you have a question, we didn't get to it, drop it in the chat now, and we'll try to get to it before the end of the show. But this one comes from Hicksy, and he has a DFS question, and he wants to know who to use as his wide receiver 3, Corey Davis, Marvin Jones, or Marquez Callaway from the Saints.
For me, this is Davis. And it's easily Davis because the Jets are going to be down a couple of wide receivers. He seemed to gain a rapport with Zach Wilson during the preseason, a guy who's coming off a near 1,000-yard campaign. He's the number one wide receiver for the men in green. Davis is the call for me.
I agree. I mean, Davis was absolutely a league winner for me last year. He helped me get to the finals in the Scott Fish Bowl. He was amazing, and he's had incredible rapport with his new quarterback. So why wouldn't you go for it here? It's definitely Davis for me. Callaway, as you mentioned, is going to have tough coverage, and Marvin Jones is fine, but we're expecting, not a lot from the Detroit. Sorry.
We got a couple more questions sneaking in. A lot of them are involving Saquon Barkley, and rightfully so. I think people, now that they see the reports about Saquon maybe not getting that full workload today, which somewhat was expected based on some of the things that the Giants have said throughout the summer. It's going to be a lot of Devontae Booker against his former team in the Denver Broncos. But Dustin wants to know, should he start Sony Michel or Saquon Barkley? This might be the territory where it's like, okay, now maybe we're getting a little bit too far overboard with the Saquon Barkley panic, unless Fabs, you disagree on that.
I'd probably play Barkley here. We don't know what kind of workload Sony Michel is going to get against the Bears. And I kind of think tonight will be more of a Darrell Henderson night in that Rams backfield. Sony Michel traded during preseason. Don't know if he's got a full grasp of the offense yet. I mean, I'm sure if he doesn't, he's very close. But I think Henderson will be the lead guy tonight for the Rams. Maybe that changes moving forward. I can't go there. Barkley, even with 10 touches, I'd rather have over Sony Michel.
Jen, you with Fabs on this one? You just can't use Michel over Barkley at this point?
Absolutely. The ceiling's going to be much higher for Saquon. Even with the limited touches he has, he can probably do a lot more with limited touches than Michel can do with a bulk of touches, which I agree. I don't think he's going to get. I think it's a Darrell Henderson night.
All right, let's get to some player props. Try to make some people money betting on football. And again, if you live in Colorado, make sure you go over to sisportsbook.com. Jen, you have some great player props that you handpicked, combed through the sports book, and you have 5 great props for today. I want to start off with the revenge factor. Yes. Robbie Anderson going against his former team of the New York Jets. His over-under receiving yards is at 50.5. That could be one catch for Robbie Anderson. What are you taking when it comes to Anderson minus 120 over under 50.5?
Exactly. I am taking the over here. I mean, listen, Robbie Anderson was phenomenal last year for fantasy coaches. He met that mark in 10 out of 16 games played. But the real story here is, of course, the revenge game narrative. So not only is Robbie Anderson reunited with Sam Darnold, his former New York Jets quarterback, they're hosting them. So, of course, the Jets have made personnel changes too, but they allowed 7.3 yards per pass attempt and the 10th most yards to opposing wide receivers last year. So surely these two are going to put on a show for us today.
Fabs, is that Panthers offense going under the radar this year? Christian McCaffrey's back. They have Terrace Marshall, a great rookie wide receiver. DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson in the lineup. I'm expecting big things from Carolina.
Yeah, I am too. I'm not talking about, turning into the Kansas City Chiefs, right? But a lot of this has to do with how Sam Darnold adjusts to the new offense. And listen, I mean, he played under Adam Gase for how many years in New York? I mean, that's a death sentence right there. Now you got Joe Brady. Joe Brady's a guy who knows offenses. And I feel like when Darnold went to the Panthers that this was going to end up being a good move for his career. And the Panthers had enough faith in Darnold to bring him in, not draft a quarterback. He'll be the guy this season. Great revenge game narrative today against the men in green. So this offense should be a lot of fun to watch. I'm really excited to watch Christian McCaffrey come back after only playing 3 games last year. He is going to be an absolute stud, and we all know it.
All right, next 2 props is from the same game. And Jen, I can't believe you went to this one. Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans. You found some diamonds in the rough. And boy, this game is going to be rough, especially with the Texans basically just admitting they're not going to win a football game this year. But you like Brandon Cooks and you like James Robinson. Tell us about the props and tell us why.
I do. I like Brandon Cooks for an anytime touchdown at plus 135, mostly because, hey, it's plus money. Who doesn't love to see that? But, last year, Cooks found the end zone both times they faced the Jags. And in one of those games, he went for 161 yards. Jacksonville gave up the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers in 2020. It's plus money. Who else are they going to use? Cooks played the 2nd most snaps for the Texans last year. I definitely see Brandon Cooks finding the end zone. And as far as James Robinson, Houston surrendered the second most fantasy points on the ground last year to opposing running backs. So James Robinson should be here. We know there's no Travis Etienne. I just think he's a 3-down back that's going to have a great day. And the rushing yard prop is only 66.5 yards. So I'm taking the over here.
Fabs, I know you were pretty high on James Robinson this year. As soon as that news dropped about Travis Etienne being out for the season, where does J-Rob rank on your running back list this week?
I have him in the top 8. I mean, Houston, no Etienne. Like, Carlos Hyde's going to get his. Like, I get it. But Urban Meyer wants to run the football, right? And I like Trevor Lawrence as a QB2. I think most people do in 2 QB super flex leagues. But you also, this is still a rookie quarterback playing his first regular season game in the National Football League. So they're going to want to protect him, and they're going to protect him with the run. And let's not give James Robinson, some sort of, some sort of analysis here where he's not a good running back. The guy was the RB7 last year, for crying out loud. And everyone was all about Etienne because, well, he's the rookie. He's the shiny new toy. He was drafted by this regime. I promise you, this regime is going to love having James Robinson, and fantasy managers are going to love having James Robinson, especially against the Texans and that terrible defense.
The highest over/under of the week on SI Sportsbook is the Cardinals and Titans. That's at 54 points. It's gone up 1.5 points since we started this show, so the money is coming in on this number. Jen, you have Kyler Murray player prop for that high-scoring affair.
I do. I'm taking Kyler Murray for over 310.5 total yards. Look, neither defense is any good here, but Tennessee surrendered the 5th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks last year and allowed the 7th most yards on the ground. So I don't know whether Murray's going to use his legs. He says he wants to do that yet. I don't really buy it, but he's at least got a lot of air weapons. If not, 311 total yards feels like a lock to me.
All right, then let's go to the New Orleans backfield where you have both of the Saints running backs. You're taking the over on Alvin Kamara rushing yards at 58.5 and the over on Tony Jones Jr. There's no more Latavius Murray here. Tony JJ, he's the number 2 running back for the Saints. You're taking the over on a 21.5 rushing yards.
Okay, so this is a fun one. So as we talked about earlier, the run defense for Green Bay has been actually pretty bad. Last time these two met up, he had 58 yards. Now the player prop for today is 58.5. But here's what's interesting. Last year, Latavius Murray had 12 attempts for 58 yards himself versus the Pack. So I'm pretty sure Alvin Kamara can pick up an extra yard here. I know he's going to do a lot of his work through the air, but I think he can clear 58.5 rushing yards at plus money, plus 110. And that makes me think that Tony Jones Jr. can also exceed his running prop, which is 21.5 for plus 125. Look, as I said, Green Bay run defense, not very good historically. And last year, Latavius Murray had 58 yards. I think Tony Jones Jr. can probably clear 21.5.
Love those player props. I hope everyone makes some money following Jen's great advice on SI Sportsbook this weekend. Let's do some rapid fire questions here. We got 60 seconds left. Fabs from Frat. Should he go with Kyle Pitts or Darren Waller? 2 excellent options at tight end.
Both. What are you how did you draft both of those guys? Start them both. If you have to pick one, it's Waller.
All right, Jen, I'll go over to you. From Bo, should Bo go with Jacoby Myers or Michael Pittman?
Michael Pittman.
Brant, Fabs, over to you. Brant wants to know, full point PPR, Kareem Hunt or Tyrell Williams?
Oh, that's a good one.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to go with
Tyson Williams. I'm sorry.
I'm still going to go with Tyson Williams.
Fully expected to be that Ravens lead back given their turnover and really unfortunate events with Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Justice Hill. Bad news for that Ravens backfield so far. Next question is from Michael Matthews. Mike Davis or Devin Singletary in a PPR format. Jen, what do you got?
Don't like him, but I'm going to go with Mike Davis.
All right, and that will conclude week 1 of SI Winners Club. Hopefully we got to all your questions. You can check out Michael Fabiano's excellent set of player rankings. That's all up on si.com/fantasy. Don't miss out on Jen's player props and her betting picks. That's up on SI Betting. Go to si.com for all the latest fantasy and betting analysis. Jen, Fabs, great job as always. Any last words before we get to watch some NFL action on Sunday?
Go ahead, Piacenti. Come on.
I mean, have fun, guys. Remember, this is supposed to be fun. So we're guessing, right? We're hoping that everybody does exactly as we projected. If something doesn't work out, don't freak out. Plenty of time. Just enjoy the football.
I say you're going to start your studs, but don't be afraid if you've got depth at a certain position to put one of those studs on the bench in favor of a good player with a much better matchup.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching and good luck in week 1.